Hey there everybody, it's markcrilley. I'm back with another how to draw video. This is number 13 in my ongoing series of videos related to animals. I've done videos on how to draw a dog, cat, tiger, all manner of different beasts, and today we're going to be learning how to draw a rabbit. Now people like to know the size that I'm working at, so I've put a little square here in place to show you. It's 3 inches on all sides. That works out to about 7.5 centimeters. Let's not waste any time. Let's get on with some basic guidelines for drawing the shape of the head. So a rather irregular shape here, vaguely circular, but notice this angle here, which would be sort of the forehead, I guess, the rabbit's forehead coming down here. The tip of the nose area comes right up to that line, and then we have a curving around of what I always call the snout of the region, which is certainly not the right terminology, but I'm going to keep using it, darn it. Curves around like that, and we'll be adding considerably more definition to this. Notice where the rest of the head comes off of that one. If you get that line starting down there, touches this bottom line again, then curving around. And this, of course, is where the ears, the world-famous rabbit's ears, are going to extend. But we're going to get to that later. I think now what I want to do is draw the shape of the eye. So the eye, a little bit almond-shaped, you know, kind of coming to points down here on the lower right and the upper left. Not sure if that's true of all the different breeds of rabbits. I was studying, you know, photos of rabbits online to sort of get an idea of how to draw at least one type of rabbit, and that one I noticed was very much in this sort of almond-type shape. Well, let's move on to drawing the nose. So we'll be adding more detail to this later on, but for now it sort of looks like a letter Y, doesn't it? And the only thing that I would do is maybe add a little more of a curve up here to this one side to indicate the rest of the shape of the nose when seen from this point of view, which is kind of a 3/4 point of view. Well, why don't we go ahead and get on to drawing at least one of the 2 rabbit ears. So interestingly, it doesn't really come to a sharp point, as you might imagine, a little more curved at the end. And I noticed how straight it was coming off of the head before kind of tilting just a little bit as it heads towards the tip. And then notice there's a little bit of a differentiation between this part of the ear and the base here. There's just a little bit of a break there. And now it's time to draw the interior shape, which really will finish off the basic structure of this one ear. So this opening of the ear here, a little bit leaf-shaped, I would say, it looks to me. Right here, this line, you can consider this fairly structural as like the upper edge. But as you come down here, it becomes a little tricky, and we'll get into this later when I get to the fur, but this area here, this line is maybe more differentiating between a brown area of fur and the light white hairs that line the edges of the ear. And this as well over here is a little more just delineating a change in color rather than so much a structural thing. But we're going to get more into that kind of stuff later on. Let's go ahead and draw the other ear. So for this ear, we're not having to draw the interior. It's sort of facing away from us. And indeed, you know, as the ear moves, you would probably have it take on different shapes, different contours. In this particular position, it has a sort of thumb-like look to me. You know, that sort of shape comes a little more to a point, although, as I said before, not to a real pointy point. It's a semi-pointillistic point. Oh boy, I usually wait till later before I start getting loopy. My apologies. Let's go ahead and draw just 2 more lines, and then I think we can sort of knock it off with putting in basic guidelines, get onto some real-time drawing. All right, so the pose I've drawn here is a very relaxed pose with the line of the back up high here next to the head. I think if it was raising its head, you would get quite a different contour here. And now I think it's time to quickly erase in time-lapse the guidelines so that we can get on to doing a little bit of real-time shading. Now the first thing I'm going to do is come in here and sort of rope off an area of white around the eye. And this is really helping us to differentiate between a toned in area of fur and an area that remains largely the white of the page. But notice that it's a little wider over here, at least on this particular breed of rabbit, sort of tapering off a bit, and then again getting kind of wide over here on this side. You have to imagine that this area here is all going to be white later on by comparison to the surrounding areas of gray, or it would be brown, if you want to try to do it in full color. This video is not going to be in full color, but I'm not going to stop you. If you want to go make it a purple bunny, I'm not going to stop you. In any case, having got that in place, I think what I'll do is begin to add a little bit of detail to the eye. Now I'm going to put a highlight here, sort of an oval-shaped area of white, and by shading in around it, but not within that little circle, we will immediately begin to get a little more of an illusion of shininess, glassiness to this eye. I'm always sort of amazed how big of a difference it makes adding just a single highlight there. And later on, I'm going to be darkening this in yet more with a black Prismacolor colored pencil. This video is one of what I would call a classic Crilly two-pencil method drawing, starting with this. Well, I'm using a Dixon Ticonderoga, but it could be any sort of number 2 pencil that you're comfortable with. And then I'm going to add a lot of contrast and darkness later on with this black colored pencil called the black Prismacolor. Now I think I need to actually erase away, sort of tone this down a little. You're getting out of control, line. I need to tone you down. And let's move on now to beginning to work on the nose here. Again, we've got, at least what I've seen on some breeds of rabbit, a sort of white area that surrounds the nostril. And just a little sort of trim area of white above that line of the nostril, and then a larger rounded area below. And then this sort of Y, I talked about this as like the letter Y, at least on some breeds of rabbit, there's going to be a dark area on either side of this. And then just below this branch of the Y, you start to darken in there as well. And because of the pose that I've got this rabbit in, you can't really see too much of what's going on over there on the other side. But that means we don't have to draw it. Woohoo! In any case, now it's probably time to start moving on to getting some sense of the direction of the fur. Now, I run into trouble with these animal videos. Some people really do want to see the entire drawing real time when it comes to the fur. It is, for me, essentially impossible to do because it's like a 3-hour process. And I sound like a broken record when I go into this explanation, but every video is somebody's first video. And so I'm just giving you a warning right here. I'm not going to be able to do all of the fur real time. That would take me 3 hours. I don't want to make a 3-hour video. I mean, the uploading time alone would just drive me bonkers. But notice the direction of the fur here. And one thing that is going to be a contrast with some of these other animal videos that I've done, in doing like a drawing of a lion or a wolf, there's a lot of variation in the length of the lines that you're using to render the fur. When I study photos of rabbits, I'm struck by the relative uniformity of the length of the fur all around the area of the head, with maybe the exception of coming down here to the nose, and this seems to be common to a lot of furry mammals, is when the closer you get to the tip of the nose, that is when the fur tends to shorten up and become very, very what am I trying to say? Smooth, less fluffy, less fluffular. in orientation. But you can see me using shorter lines here. And I don't know if I've got the direction quite right. They probably sort of radiate out in all directions from the tip of the nose. But certainly by the time you get to what would maybe be the bridge of the nose, up here, heading towards the forehead, the lines are clearly heading in this sort of northwest direction, for lack of a better word, all heading in the same direction, and all, as I said before, of a similar length. And then let's pay attention to the length or the direction, I should say, of the fur coming off here on this side of the eye. Really kind of a little bit horizontal, maybe just beginning to head a little bit up toward the ear. I would say a big part of getting the fur right is paying attention to the direction that the fur goes in on various parts of the face. And, just as a general rule, patience, you got to just slow down. Don't try to get this all done in a half an hour or even 1 hour. I would advise you to set aside at least 2 hours for the fur alone. Now, as I said here, sort of horizontal, as you begin to come down here below the eye, as you might expect, it starts sort of fan out diagonally, heading southwest. Is that what we're going to say? Why not? Let's stick with the directional method of describing this fur. Excuse me. I must be allergic to my own bad jokes. And then as we come over here, definitely continuing this sort of diagonal direction. But I suppose as it comes over here towards the nose, you're going to have these two directions kind of flowing together, almost like a river. Like two rivers joining together, heading towards the nose. But I would say compared to a lot of these other animals, like the wolf or the lion or even the tiger, I think your job in terms of rendering the fur is simplified by the similarity in length. You don't have to pay so much attention to changing lengths of lines to simulate the changing length of fur. Obviously, with a lion, right, you've got the mane, and that requires very long lines, and then a similar thing happens as it comes down towards the nose. They get very tightly packed, and that in itself can become this very laborious chore of rendering all of that with lines. Here you can almost kind of zone out in a relaxing way and assume that most of these lines are of similar length. Now, one thing that I talked about earlier as I sort of erased away this area here, it's a bit subtle what happens over here, but it's like the front of the upper lip, the hair lip, as it were, is differentiated partly by its structure, but then partly also by the color of the fur. And I noticed on some breeds of rabbit, at least, that there was a dark area back here. I'm going to sort of just very quickly shade in here. Later on, I'm going to do this in a more committed way. I'm just sort of trying to make that uniform. But then over here, as we start drawing the fur around the nose, I saw, again, at least on some breeds, that there was an area of white fur below the nose heading towards the mouth, which is entirely, by the way, the mouth entirely invisible or not visible from this point of view. I think you'd have to get really down low to see a rabbit's mouth because it's sort of concealed by that upper lip structure. And I'm not doing such a good job of rendering the direction of the lines. Come on, stay focused, Crilly. But what I wanted to point out to you was how the sort of whiteness of the fur over here can help to differentiate these two sections, what I would call the sort of cheek section and the snoutal region. I'm going to go back to my use of the entirely bogus word snoutal region. And people are always happy to correct me. People who know the words better than I do, which is to say everyone on Earth. And that kind of gets us to that stage. I think what I'm going to do now is to refocus the camera and head over to where the ears are. That's going to take us a certain amount of time for figuring out the various directions of the fur and where the dark areas and the light areas go. So why don't we begin by darkening in this area of the interior of the ear, just to sort of help us get a sense of the structure. It's very dark down here where the very little light is getting in to illuminate it. If you are doing this in full color, this is the part that is going to be pink. The interior, I believe, of most rabbits, the interior of the ear has a distinctly pinkish hue to it. And what I'm trying to do, I'm lowering my pencil down to the page so as not to get too much directional line work in here. This area does not have visible fur on it. It's very smooth. You're basically looking at skin. Pinkish skin on the inside of the ear. In fact, I might, and some people don't like when I do this, but I might go in and smear a little with the finger just to make it super smooth. Mark, the oils of your fingers are destroying the paper. This will not be able to be hung in a museum because the oils of your hand are ruining the paper. It's probably true. They're probably right. I'm probably wrong. But every once in a while, I allow myself to sort of smooth things out a little bit, just to get that effect. Now, here's an area where you can get quite, detail-oriented if you want. And I'm drawing, in a way, the spaces between the white areas of fur here. Again, very sort of horizontal in orientation, all the way along here. So you can see me sort of just, am I drawing the fur or am I drawing the spaces between the individual hairs? History will be the judge. But you can see how drawing lines across here helps to suggest that sort of furriness. Why don't we do a little bit of the, we'll get some of the directional hairs that come up here. Now, I said that along the face, most of the hairs are pretty similar in length. I think once you get up to the ears, they do start to noticeably shorten up a little. So I'm going to start switching to kind of shorter lines to make the hair look make the fur a little shorter, maybe a little rougher looking, a little less fluffy looking in this area. And again, the part that is going to probably enrage certain viewers is that, I'm focusing on getting a base layer of drawing here for the fur, getting a sense of the direction, maybe paying some attention to the length. But I haven't gone in for what I call the polishing phase, where I try to deepen the darkness of certain areas and just really work at it until there's great contrast throughout. That's the thing that takes, as I say, a couple of hours. And that's the thing that I don't want to subject you to in terms of a narrated video. Some people, again, say, well, I don't mind if you make a 3-hour video in which you talk about what you bought at the grocery store this morning. And I'm sure there are some of you who would not object to a video like that. It's not my style. I just have to own it at this stage, guys. I think a 30-40 minute video is kind of ideal for me. And that's why you're going to see me going back over this all in time lapse later on to kind of polish it up. But notice how dark my pencil work gets right here at the tip. Again, probably not true of every breed of rabbit on Earth, but certainly on some photos I saw, quite a contrast between the darkness of this edge and then coming up here again, you're sort of getting an indication of white fur is what you're trying to suggest. Now, I told you that the inside of the interior area here is all sort of like skin that you're looking at. In fact, I could even see veins, almost look like varicose veins on one photograph, if you want to get into that level of detail. And it is, for the most part, smooth. But over here, as we reach the lower edge of the rabbit's ear, the fur does start to extend a little bit into the interior. Very delicate line work you're going to have to do if you want to render this properly. But notice what I'm doing in terms of the direction of these lines, going toward the northeast. What's with this direction thing? But diagonal lines, all in a very similar sort of direction. Quite dark here down at the edge. And this is what you'll start to understand, when I put that initial guideline in there, it really was more about the color of the fur than it was about the structure. But I'm going in here again and again with these short little diagonal lines. And then if you have the patience for it, what you really want to do in this area is have sort of a gradual fade as the fur sort of gives way to the skin. The very super smooth skin. And I may even go in here a little later on. I am going to pull out the white gouache, although I've got a different tube of white gouache. Some people might feel that's controversial. Mark, we're used to seeing one particular type, but over here I'm darkening in probably a structural area. It may have something to do with the color of the fur. But over here, it's like this is all white lines of fur down here, and there's almost like a little line between them, between the two areas of white fur. But I noticed that back behind it, a little bit of darkness. And that maybe brings us to the end of what I want to say about drawing this particular ear. It has been a while since we had Old Man Time-Lapse help me out with this drawing. I think what I'm going to do is invite him in to help me do this other ear, all in time-lapse. I think I've given you, the basics of how I render this stuff. Let's go ahead and do this other ear in time-lapse, and then I'll be back to start to get into maybe a few more final details on the face. So a couple of things I'd point out here. Notice how we get an extra area of darkness here at the very tip and sort of a gradient fade as it moves down towards the rest of the ear. Quite a bit of darkness here above the forehead, kind of between the two ears, helps to visually separate those two the two structures of the ears. And then sort of darkness down here that I think is formed by maybe structure beneath the fur, maybe also the color of the fur contributing to it, but at the place where the ears separate from the head. And you know how rabbits are able to sort of turn their ears very precisely in space. This may be related to that, the sort of structure of how it's able to move and pivot around and so forth. It may be. I don't know. I'm no rabbit expert. Then why are you doing a video on how to draw a rabbit? Crilly. Anyway, I think it's time to move on to drawing the whiskers and maybe add a little more detail to the nose. All right, so maybe before I do the whiskers, I will try to get a little more contrast in here around the area of the nostrils. And then also to go in with my eraser and make a little more clear what I was talking about, this area of white fur that is in the immediate area of the nostrils. And I'm kind of going in and trying to create contrast here. So there's almost a little white halo of very short fur right around the nostrils themselves. And then I'm trying to decide if I should, because there are like little dots where the where the whiskers protrude from. Protrude, is that the right word? I'm going in here with a kneaded eraser to kind of clean up this area. People do periodically say, how do you keep from smudging the drawing? And the truth is I do sort of periodically smudge the drawing, and I have to go in with an eraser like this to clean things up. So let's go ahead. I think I'll start by doing the actual whiskers themselves. I suppose on some rabbits the whiskers are white. I saw in at least one breed that they are black, which is helpful because it's so much easier to do with a pencil, something like that, than to do it in white. You know, you almost have to do it with paint. And that was quite a long line there. It is a little nerve-wracking to know how long should I make these whiskers, but pay also attention to the direction. And it really is, at this stage, I would say kind of like on the face of a clock, you know, with the lines kind of heading out, radiating out, almost like the rays of the sun. I'm doing all these nature metaphors. It's like two rivers. And but yeah, I noticed that they do sort of go out in the full range of directions. And not too much variety. Like, I wouldn't make one down here that starts curving up like that. They do seem to be pretty tame in the sense of as the point of departure is higher on the nose, so the direction heads more in that direction. So the direction heads more in that direction. Oh, Crilly, you need more coffee. So the direction goes more diagonal, heads further out. Not much variety in terms of one line crossing over the other, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Trying and failing, Crilly. And as you get down here, there probably comes a point where there's no space for whiskers anymore, and it kind of comes to a stop. But I noticed quite a lot of little black lines in some photos I studied right down here, maybe thinning out a touch as you go further north to get back into my directions of the compass kind of thing. And then over here you're going to see them sort of firing off in these directions. And just using the contrast of the white of the page, it becomes relatively, it's much easier for them to be seen over here. But I would say the horizontal area, the point at which they become horizontal, is just a little bit north of the nose. And then as you get south of the nose, they start curving down. You go past that horizontal direction. I'm trying to move myself so as to do this a bit more gracefully. Yeah, I'm going to have to actually stand up. Excuse me, change in audio here. I'm standing up so as to get the natural pivot point of my wrist working in my favor. And I think we got enough here in that way. I suppose the next thing to do, as I take a seat again on my, you can hear the wheels rolling across the floor, is I'm going to come down here and really just in a shading way. I'm not going to go into the fur too much at this stage. Just want to show how helpful it is to get some contrast between the sort of whitish fur down here at the base of the head, and then if you darken in below, that's going to help the head stand out, and it also, I think, just reflects the reality of many breeds of rabbit. I am just shading this in at this stage, but I think to make it consistent, it is going to have to be rendered in a fur-like way, as I did throughout the rest of the drawing later on. I suppose what I can do, for those of you who want to get some tips on the direction of the fur, I think it more or less goes as you would expect, heading this way across the back, right? Then way over here, it's going to be coming down, sort of following the form of that initial line. So I don't think there are any big surprises in terms of the direction of the fur coming across this way. But again, you can see that this is going to be a hugely time-consuming part of it. and I'm going to get to that later, but I thought what I would do now, while I have one last moment, prior to the time-lapse part of the video, I'm going to go in with my black Prismacolor, a black Prismacolor colored pencil, and I'm going in here and I'm actually going to delineate the eye socket just a little bit inside of that initial shape that I had drawn, turning one part of it into the sort of eyelid and darkening in here to make the actual surface of the eye itself. And as I said, that single white highlight, if I can go back in and make sure that that's nice and clean, the white of the page, as I go in and darken things in around that highlight, that'll make it pop, and that will make the eye look super, super shiny, almost like a marble or something. I always make sure that I get a lot of darkness right there. It's like the very greatest contrast you can manage right there around that highlight. And sure enough, as you move away and maybe allow yourself to lighten things up just a little bit, you really do get a nice illusion of the sort of glossiness. And there's a sort of a nice contrast with the relatively rough-looking fur that surrounds it. Well, sadly, I think we have kind of reached the point where I'm going to have to kick things into time-lapse and finish things off. But I do hope that I gave you enough pointers along the way that you can sort of see where I'm headed here, and without seeing everything in real time, understand how it is that I'm going to get to my final result. So bear with me, folks. It's time to bring in Old Man Time-lapse. I do love bunny rabbits. My favorite kind of animal. And he is going to help us to finish off this drawing, and then I'll be back with a few final words. All right, well, you know, as I said, this really was like a 2 or even 3 hour process here of working on the fur. To sum up, as if it's possible to sum up 3 hours of work, I would say, in this case in particular, having the black Prismacolor is an important part of simulating this fur. You can see all these tiny little black lines here and there. That contrast is very important for conveying the texture. If you try to do the whole thing with just an ordinary pencil, I would say you'd really have to be pushing down very hard periodically to try to get that dark black. Now, I remember one thing that I really should have included here, and that is the idea that, you know, the whiskers are mainly around the nose, but there are also whiskers almost like eyebrows coming out of, as you would expect, the sort of forehead, the foreheadal region. So here with the contrast of the white background, very easy to see, but they should also be over here. I think they're going to be a little harder to make visible, but I guess I can maybe throw in one or two in a place where they stand out. And hopefully that finishes that off. Now I wanted to also add a little bit of white gouache, so let me refocus the camera. Alright, so I've got a tube of white gouache here, different from the usual tube, a different brand, I think, but it's basically the same thing. And I'm going to go in, and, well, the first thing I can do, which is a safe bet, is to drop in some extra white on top of that little highlight there. I thought I might also get just a little indication of reflection right here. Might make it look a little more like there's whiteness, or what am I talking about? I'm completely losing my mind. Sorry, my brain fell apart right there. It is a glint of, well, it's moistened, let us say, that part of the eye, and by putting a little bit of white there, boy, I really did sort of lose my complete thought on that one. A little scary, guys. You were there to witness it. Anyway, I'm going into these other areas, dropping in a little white here and there. Anywhere where you want the individual white hairs to show up, this is your chance to do it. And if you've got a thin enough watercolor brush, you can hopefully, you know, through practice, and you could even practice on other pieces of paper, you can get little tiny hairs, white hairs, to show up against the gray behind it. You do need an area of contrast like that for it to show up. Let's see if I can get it. Yeah, here we go. Do you see a little of that? Starts to show up a little better. And I would say that this is not absolutely necessary. This is sort of like taking it to a higher level. If you don't have white gouache, if you don't want to go to the trouble of buying white gouache, it's not necessary. Just sort of leave the white of the page in that area. Well, I'm going to go ahead and use the old man time-lapse, his assistant in finishing off this last bit. And then I will be back with a few final words. Alright, well, that brings us to the end of my video on how to draw a rabbit. Let me know what you thought of it. I hope you found it helpful. And please, let me know of any other animals you would like to see me do in the future. I know it took me a while to get to this one, but I do enjoy doing these animal videos, and I'm sure I will be doing more in the months ahead. But for now, I want to thank anyone who has supported me by getting any of my books, like Brody's Ghost, my graphic novel, now complete in one edition. We got the drawing lesson, a graphic novel that teaches you how to draw, as well as the Realism Challenge, my book on hyper-realistic illustrations, and my very latest book, Mastering Manga 3. I'm always super, super appreciative of anyone who decides to help me out by ordering any of those books. But let's go ahead and lay down this pencil. I want to thank you all for watching this video. I really hope you enjoyed it, and I'll be back with another one real soon.